Hello everyone, welcome to the third lesson of Speculative Kabbalah and Samaelite Metaphysics. This is the third part of our excursus on the historical evolution of Kabbalah. I will hope to end this section with this lesson in order to start making a deepened examination on the Kabbalah principles before starting to examine our metaphysics system, just as is stated in our program that you can look at on the classroom website on Google. So let's begin. As we know, under the influence of the early Kabbalistic ideas spread from Provence to Spain in the 30th century, finding acceptance in Gerona, Catalonia. This city became a significant center for the development of Kabbalah in Spain and the creation of Kabbalistic literature. The works written here sought to spread the fundamental ideas of Kabbalah outside esoteric circles, sometimes alluding to them in texts that were not strictly Kabbalistic. The main figures in this group included a mysterious character called Ben Belima, Judah Yakara, master of Nachmanides, Ezra Solomon, Azriel, Moses Nachmanides of course, Abraham Isaac Gerondi, for example, and many others. These Kabbalists wrote not only strictly Kabbalistic works, but also letters containing important accounts of their feelings and contemporary discussions. Asher B. David, for example, grandson of Isaac the Blind, represented a personal and literary link between the Kabbalistics of Provence and those of Gerona. Asher's texts were widely circulated in manuscripts form and contained contents similar to those of Ezra and Azriel. Azriel stood out among the other members of the group for the systematic nature of his thought and the depth of his intellect. His work incorporated Neoplatonic and Gnostic elements, reaching its first peak in the interpretation of these aspects. The most influential figure was Nachmanides, the highest legal and religious authority of his time in Spain. His early acceptance of Kabbalah contributed greatly to its spread, providing a guarantee of continuity with the rabbinic tradition and protecting Kabbalists from accusation of heresy. Although these Kabbalists did not compose works outside the field of Kabbalah and were known only to an inner circle, their influence was significant due to their connection with figures such as Nachmanides, who ensured continuity with the tradition and contributed to the acceptance of Kabbalah in Spain. From the beginning, two opposing tendencies emerged among the Kabbalists. One sought to keep Kabbalah in closed circle as an esoteric system, while the other aspired to spread its influence among the general population. These two tendencies have been in conflict for much of the history of Kabbalah. In addition, two stances developed regarding the relationship between the bearers of rabbinic culture and the Kabbalah itself. The Kabbalists were considered both proponents of a conservative ideology and defenders of traditions, and suspected of having non-Jewish tendencies and being innovators. In disputes over the philosophy and the writings of Maimonides in the 13th century, the Kabbalists of Gerona sided with the traditionalists. The Kabbalah was presented as a symbolic interpretation of the Jewish world and way of life, based on theosophy that taught the occult secrets of the deity and the rejection of traditionalist interpretations of the Torah and the commandments. Nachmanides, a key figure, incorporated Kabbalah into his writings, especially in the commentary of the Torah, where he used veiled allusions to interpretations according to the true way. He also used Kabbalistic symbolism in his Piyutim and his views on the fate of the soul after death. The writings of the Kabbalists of Gerona were characterized by a definite symbolic structure, especially with regard to the theories of the Sefirot. Okay. Symbolism became also the basis for the development of Kabbalah in this group, with agreement on fundamental factors despite differences in detail between the various Kabbalists. There were also contacts between the Spanish Kabbalists and the Ashkenaz Hasidim, evidenced by works such as Keter Shem Tov by Abraham Axelrod of Cologne, which dealt with the Tetragrammaton and the Sefirot itself. This text represented a renewal of ecstatic tendencies and introduced the prophetic Kabbalah. Okay. Moreover, it is likely that an anonymous Kabbalist from the Gerona or Provençal circle was the author of the book Temunah, written before 1250, which influenced Kabbalah until the 16th century. The work dealt with the image of God through the forms of the Hebrew letters and explained the theory of Shemittot, mentioned without clarification by the Kabbalists of Gerona. The combination of Theosophical Gnostic and Neoplatonic philosophical elements developed in Provence and Gerona, as we saw, led to a relative supremacy, sometimes exaggerated, of one element over the other in other currents from 1230s onwards. An extreme mystical tendency, expressed in philosophical terms, created its own symbolism not based on the theory or nomenclature of the Sefirot of the Kabbalists of Gerona. An important exponent of this mystical philosophical tendency was Isaac ibn Latif, active between the 1230s and 1270s. Ibn Latif, considered a kind of independent mystic, drew philosophical inspiration from Arabic and Hebrew writings on the Neoplatonists, in particular from Ibn Gabirol's Mekor Ahim and the works of Abraham ibn Ezra. For everyone who is wondering, don't worry, you don't have to remember all these names, just the main ones, okay? So don't worry. By the way, his main work, Shahar HaShamahim, written in 1238, presented itself as a continuation and a surrogate of Maimonides' Guide for the Perplexed, incorporating a speculative mystical vein. Ibn Latif, by its way, recognized the primeval will as the source of all emanations, dividing the divine logos into will, and the first created thing as the supreme intellect. Ibn Latif's system included not only the creation of different phases, symbolically named light, fire, ether, and water, but making each of them associated with a branch of wisdom, such as mysticism, metaphysics, astronomy, and physics. He also created a complete system of the universe based on a forced interpretation of the scriptures, while opposing the extreme allegorists. His ideas on prayer and authentic understanding were strongly influenced by mysticism, going beyond the theory of Kavanah and the meditation common among the Gerona Kabbalists. Okay. Ibn Gabirol's influence is evident in the specific critiques of Kabbalistic theosophy found in his Surat HaOlam. Despite the differences, Ibn Latif considered Kabbalah superior to philosophy. arguing that it grasped a truth of a temporal nature, okay, while philosophical truth was timeless. Also, according to Ibn Latif, maximum intellectual understanding reaches only the back of the divine, while an image of the face emerges only in a supra-intellectual ecstasy, superior even to prophecy. He called this perception the bliss of supreme communion. Okay? True prayer brought the human intellect into communion with the active intellect like a kiss. It then ascended to union with the first created thing through pure thought, finally aspiring to become before God himself. So it's a very complex intellectual speculation. Abraham Abulafia, by its way, represents a second exponent of mystical philosophical trends, separated from the Theosophical Kabbalah of the Gerona school, with the goal of developing an ecstatic form of Kabbalah. Okay? Abulafia had contact with a group using letter combination and number mysticism, influenced in part by the Ashkenaz Hasidim in Germany and perhaps by Sufi circles during his travels in the East. His teacher, Baruch Togarmi, taught Abulafia the principles of prophetic Kabbalah, okay, to which he devoted his life after gaining enlightenment in Barcelona in 1271. His prophetic and possibly messianic claims aroused opposition in Spain and Italy, but his books, beginning in the late 13th century, were widely read. Abulafia expounded his Kabbalistic system as a guide from Maimonides-like philosophical interest to prophecy and mystical experience. A passionate admirer of Maimonides, Abulafia regarded his system as a continuation, okay, and elaboration of the Guide of the Perplexed. Unlike Maimonides, who disassociated himself from the possibility of prophecy in his time, Abulafia defended it, using the way of names or science of combination as a means to achieve prophecy. Abulafia, by the way, wrote 26 prophetic books, of which only one, Sefer Haot, has come down to us. His main work, Derek Hashemot, was considered of great value and was based on an in-depth study of Sefer Yetzirah and the related techniques. He saw his Kabbalah as an addition to the pre-existing corpus, without contradicting important works such as the Bahir, the Temunah, and the writings of Nachmanides. His Kabbalah found significant echoes in the 15th century, first in Italy and then in other countries. His meditation manuals such as Sefer HaSeruf or Asheel and especially Ayei HaOlam Haba focus on the holy names and the letters of the alphabet, such as the previous thoughts, providing a practical instruction for mystical experience. This type of manual, which laid out the techniques of mystical experience, filled a gap in the traditional Kabbalistic literature, and despite criticism, had a significant influence. A disciple of Abulafia wrote Sha'arei Zedek, a short book on prophetic Kabbalah, which includes an autobiographical description of his studies with the master and mystical experience. Okay, so going on. At the opposite end of the dual evolution of Kabbalah was a school of Kabbalists which were more attracted to Gnostic traditions, okay, dealing more with the Gnostic and Mileological elements than the philosophical elements. Okay, this trend, called the Gnostic tradition or the Gnostic reaction, included the brothers Jacob and Isaac, sons of Jacob Hakonem of Zoria, who traveled to Spain and Provence between 1260 and 1280s. So he just combined both of the two traditions. They met their Kabbalist predecessors, Moses B. Simeon, Todros Joseph Abulafia, and their disciple Moses of Burgos. These Kabbalists, belonging to the Gnostic school, had a strong pseudo-epigraphic element in their writings, which developed considerably and became a mixture of pseudo-epigraphy with commentaries by the authors themselves. The theory of the demonic emanation. So, take attention to these words. Already present in some earlier writings, was developed further by Isaac A. Cohen, introducing 10 demonically emanated Sephiroth, as opposed to the Holy Sephiroth. This concept contributed to the formation of the Zoharic theory of Sitra Ahra. Okay, the other side, as we know. The Gnostic school had a strong leaning toward mythology and the creation of the new names and descriptions of angelic forces below the Sephiroth. This concept led to a kind of strange mythology, unprecedented in other sources, characterized by a multiplicity of personified emanations. Jacob A. Cohen, in particular, wrote the voluminous Sefer HaHorah, based entirely on visions he claimed to have received in heaven. So, take as it is. This work presented a completely different Kabbalah from the traditional one and incorporated a personal theosophy based on a new conception of the Logos identified by Metatron. Okay? The Word of God. This new Gnostic trend was not limited to individual mystical experience, but also extended to the creation of a personal theosophy based on visions and revelations. The Kabbalah of these visions was distinct from the traditionalist part of the other writings of the Gnostic Kabbalists. The Gnostic school also introduced the magical elements and tendencies to preserve the theurgic traditions, which were absent in the Gerona school. This diversity in Kabbalah reflects a remarkable variety of approaches and developments within the medieval Kabbalistic traditions. So, let's see. Okay, so yeah. So, thinking about the Sefer HaZohar, written between 1280s and 1286 by Moses B. Shem Tov de Leon in Guadalajara, is the main product of the Spanish Kabbalah tradition, amalgamating the tendencies of the Gerona school with those of Gnostic of Castile. Moses de Leon, influenced by his interaction with both currents, created a unique and distinctive spirit of the Zohar. This text clearly represents the development of Spanish Kabbalah and left an indelible imprint on the history of medieval Judaism. Moses de Leon, a resident of Guadalajara, belonged to a community of Kabbalists active around Toledo. The work has been debated among scholars for more than 130 years, with some attempts to antedate this composition or attribute ancient lawyers. However, historical and linguistic analysis suggests that the Zohar occupies a specific place in the evolution of Spanish Kabbalah and that the Moses de Leon gave the book its distinctive imprint. The Zohar rather than representing brief allusions and interpretation like its predecessor, offers a broad panorama of interpretation and homiletics covering the entire world of Judaism, while not addressing systematic theological themes. Moses reflects the religious situation of his time through Kabbalistic interpretation. The book, presented as an ancient midrash, revolves around two poles: the mysteries of the Sephirot that constitute the life of the divine and the situation of the Jew and his destiny in the visible and invisible worlds. The author seeks to deepen the symbolic vision of Judaism, presenting a mystical interpretation that links inner perception and communion to the traditional structure. In addition, Moses de Leon emphasizes the secret value of every word and commandment in the Torah, attacking the literal conception of Judaism and promoting the observance of mitzvot. His boldness in exploring the depths of the nature of deity and in Kabbalistic speculations contributes to the renewed development of Kabbalah in later generations. His influential works had a lasting impact on Kabbalah, although many later Kabbalists used the Zohar to reinforce their conservative aims. His creation of a unique spirit amalgamating the two streams of Spanish Kabbalah presents a significant moment in the history of medieval Jewish mysticism. Moses de Leon, related to Joseph Gitachilla, another disciple of Abraham Abulafia, reflected the diversity of Kabbalistic currents of his time. Gitachilla, influenced by Abulafia and later in contact with Moses de Leon, contributed on an important work on Theosophy and Sephirot, which integrated with the Gerona and the Zohar currents. Freeing himself from the mysteries of the letters, he focuses on the Theosophy of the Sephirot. Ra'aya Meheimna and Sefer HaTikkunim, written by an unknown Kabbalist in the late 13th century or early 14th century, are a continuation of the Zohar, representing a compromise between the new Zoharic trends. They link the appearance of the Zohar to the beginning of redemption, emphasizing its role in liberation from exile. The author of these works may be close to the circle of Moses de Leon. Other pseudo-Aramaic texts similar to the Zohar include Marot Hazov Ot by David B. Judah Hasid and Livnat HaSafir by Joseph Angelino, written in 1326-27. These authors contribute to a series of Kabbalistic works written in the style of the Zohar. So we can see that Zohar had a very deep legacy till our current times, of course. Sod Darkei Hashemot, attributed to the cycle of Abraham B. David, links speculations on letters and vowels to practical Kabbalah theory. Joseph, who came from the city of Shushan, wrote a book in the 1300th century, developing the ideas of the Zoharic Hydra. Identified perhaps with the author of Sefer Hatamei HaMizvot, he also wrote Toledot Adam and Sefer HaMalkut. A third book, Sefer HaSheharim, or Sheelot LaZaken, from the 14th century, shows an old man, Zaken, identified with Moses, the biblical figure of Moses, answering the disciples' questions combining Hebrew with the Zoharic style, remaining an independent analysis work. So, let's see. So, going on. The 14th century marked a period of intellectual development that gave rise to an exceptional rich literature. The Kabbalah spread across various communities in Spain and beyond, in Italy and also this Europe. As mystical ideas became widely accessible through books, proceeding trends found continuation and interpretation. This expansion led to a blending of diverse tendencies, and attempts were made to find compromises. The Kabbalah of Gerona persists through the prolific literary activity of Nachmanides' disciples, instructed by Solomon B. Abraham Adret Rashba and Isaac Todros. Some members of this school, disliking the prevalent epigraphic style, produced numerous books aiming to clarify Nachmanides' Kabbalistic passages in his Torah commentary. An unknown author composed Mahareket Ha-Elohut in the early 14th century, a concise and systematic compendium expanding Kabbalistic doctrine. The book gained wide leadership, especially in Italy, influencing Kabbalah until the 16th century. Solomon Adret, while cautious about Kabbalistic topics, occasionally alluded to them in his commentaries and composed a lengthy prayer in Kabbalistic manner. His disciples, however, assigned a central place to Kabbalah. Figures from this school include Bahia Asher of Saragossa, whose Torah commentary significantly contributed to Kabbalah dissemination and became the first fully printed Kabbalistic text in 1492. Joshua of Tudela, author of significant Derashot, the sermons on the Torah, in 1523. The first work of its kind to give Kabbalah a central role, for example. Ahim Samuel of Lerida, author of Zeror Ha'aim, which contains a Kabbalistic exposition of halakhic topics. Shem Tov Abraham ibn Gaor of Zoria, who initiated a vast Kabbalistic literary activity between the 1315 and 1325, later emigrating to Eretz Israel. Yesod Olam by Elhan Abraham ibn Eshkira, a friend of Shem Tov Abraham, fused the Gerona tradition with Neoplatonic philosophical Kabbalah. Isaac of Acres Meimrat Einaim, sorry for the bad pronunciation, but I'm not fluent in ancient Hebrew, served as the main repository for all traditions of this school, combining influences from the Zohar and Abraham Abulafia school. So this name always occurs in this time. In contrast to attempts to reconcile Kabbalah and philosophy, Isaac B. Samuel advocates the independence and supreme value of Kabbalistic theosophy. Various anonymous texts interpreting the hidden meanings in Nachmanides' work were preserved, along with raw material collected by the school of Solomon Adret. Noteworthy among these is Meirat Einaim by Isaac Samuel of Acre, who, influenced by the Zohar and Abraham Abulafia school, wrote extensively on different aspects of Kabbalah. Isaac Samuel maintained the independence and supreme value of Kabbalistic theosophy, in contrast to attempts to find a compromise between Kabbalah and philosophy. Parts of his revelations were compiled in Ozar HaAim. Also, he had connections with many contemporary Kabbalists and was the first in this cult to write an autobiography, unfortunately lost in history. Thank you for following our third lesson. See you on next one. Bye.